Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Exceptional Scrum Master podcast. My name is Yinka and I remain your online agile coach. Now in today's episode, I want to talk about the role of a Scrum Master in PI planning. One thing I've noticed over time is that many Scrum Masters do not understand the Scaled Agile Framework. Many Scrum Masters do not know what they ought to do in that environment. So it's important that you learn your role within that framework. Now, you might be wondering, why should I learn about SAFe? And I'll give you one reason. Many of the organizations that you're going to work for are building complex products. What this means is that they are going to go beyond one team building their product. They require multiple teams to build their product. Now, if you are in a situation where multiple agile teams have to build one product, that is you scaling up agile. Now, when organizations find themselves in this situation, they are going to decide what framework to use. Now, one of the most popular frameworks out there in the market is the Scaled Agile Framework. And that's why it's very important for you as a Scrum Master to understand the frameworks that are out there. So besides you understanding, what scaling agile is, you've got to deepen your knowledge and your understanding in specific frameworks. And Scaled Agile Framework is one of the most popular out there. So it makes sense for you to deepen your understanding when it comes to SAFe. Now, when it comes to SAFe, what is your role? One of the biggest things in SAFe is PI planning, and that's why I want to focus today's video talking about that. PI planning is that big event that every art must have every 8 to 12 weeks. This is where all of the agile teams that are working on one product come together to plan for the next 8 to 12 weeks. Now, they plan based on the business objective, based on the priorities. And because these teams are closely knitted together, they are going to have dependencies that they share. So it's important for them to plan together so that they can arrange their work in such a way that they can minimize dependencies and optimize flow. Okay? Now, as a Scrum Master, when you join an organization, you will be assigned to a team. Now, that team, the possibility of that team being a part of an art is high if they are building a complex product that require multiple teams to do so. Okay, so you join a team, you're part of a team, but that team is part of an art. And an art is a group of agile teams that are working towards a business objective. So, as a Scrum Master, you go into this organization and you are familiar with the Scrum framework, you're possibly familiar with the Kanban framework, but now you have to think that now that my team is part of an art, what are my responsibilities beyond just that team? Because you clearly have a responsibility. Now, PI planning is that big event that I spoke about. Usually it's always a 2-day event, full-day event where there's a lot of activities that happens and many of the teams have to prepare for this 2-day event. So as a Scrum Master, what are some of the things you've got to do? The first thing you have to do, once you identify that your team is part of an art, is for you to understand the cadence of that art. So once you understand that my team or my art works every 8 weeks or plans every 10 weeks or plans maybe every 12 weeks, then you need to understand when to get started. My advice to you will be, once you get to the halfway mark, start preparing for the next PI. So let's assume that your organization works on 10-week PIs, then it means that once you get to the 5th week, you have to start the preparation because there is work for you to do as a Scrum Master. Now, what are some of the things that you've got to do? You have to start collaborating with your product owner, right? Your product owner is also part of a product management team where all of the features and requirements are discussed, and then your product owner pulls their own part of the work to your team. So you have to start that conversation with your product owner where you're nudging your product owner to start talking through the features that the team will be working on for the next PI. This will then get your product owner to go and talk with the product management team where they start reviewing those features, and he or she then knows the work based on priority that will be coming to your team. So your first responsibility is to ensure that you start that conversation early. And the best time will be the mid-mark of the PI, which is the half mark. So once your PO then starts getting those features from the product management team, then you then have to ensure that those are documented in your project management tool. They will come in as features. Then you have to start working with your team to start reviewing those features ahead of time, to start asking the necessary questions, and to start breaking down those features into smaller chunks. Also, while you're working with your product owner to identify, the features that are coming the team's way, you also have to work to identify the local stories. Are there any defects we need to fix? Are there any, technical debts that we have to pay back? All of those local work that your team has to also work on that is important to them also has to be considered as work that will be going into the next PI. So you want to ensure that not just the features are being discussed, but the local stories that are local to your team is also being discussed. The defects that are possible that your team might need to fix are also being discussed, and any technical debt that the team might need to pay back are also being discussed. So you want to start this conversation early on so that your team can start documenting all of those, breaking down those stories, asking the questions, adding descriptions, and all of this can be done during your refinement session, okay? But make sure that you let the team know these are the possible features that are coming our way for the next PI, having that discussion after you've had that discussion with your PO, and now you make your team aware that we have to start looking at the stories because this is the possible next priority that we're going to be working on. Making them have these conversations early actually makes the PI planning a lot smoother for your team. Even though PI planning is 2 days, we know how worked up and overwhelmed we get once we've stayed in a meeting for a long period of time. And so even though they're going to have their breakout sessions during the actual PI planning event, it's important that the team starts doing the work to then make life a lot easier for them when those 2 days finally come. Now, once you've done all of these and you've gotten your team ready and the final day comes, another thing that is important as part of your responsibility is to prepare where your team will work. Now, this would differ if this is a live event where you're doing that in the office or if it's online. Many times you're going to be working with your RTE, who is going to be like the agile coach of the program, who will be doing a lot of coordination. So let's assume that we're working remotely. Your RTE most likely may have created a Miro board that would have individual spaces for all of your work areas, but you want to work with your RTE to ensure that those areas are already created so that the team knows where to work on the Miro board, even as they will be working on their project management tool, whether it's Jira, ADO, or whatever tool that they will be using. Okay, so now when that D-Day comes, the meeting is going to kick off with, the feature review where the stakeholders are getting information on the upcoming features, and all of that stuff is going to happen. Now, another crucial part that you want to pay attention to will be the breakout rooms, because once we're done with the feature reviews, each of the teams are going to go into their breakout rooms. Now, the purpose of that breakout rooms is for us to further take looks at the features that the product owner has shared with the stakeholders and further break down those stories into user stories, right? So you want to add descriptions. You want to ensure that the team has added descriptions. You want to ensure that acceptance criteria are added. You want to ensure that the team is estimating all of this work. A major part of your work also will be to ensure that the capacity of the team has been taken into consideration while they are pulling in work to be able to know whether all of these features that the product owner is sharing with the stakeholders are things that we're most likely to complete, okay? So capacity is something that you don't want to leave out during your breakout session. Now, another major role that you'll be playing during the PI event will be to ensure that the PI plans have been drafted by your team. So ensuring that the team understands what the objectives are, what you're going to be working on. And for the first day, it will be a draft PI plan, but you need to ensure that your team has those plans drafted out. So once their plans have been drafted out and stories are going into the several iterations within that PI, you also want to ensure that your team is identifying any risk or dependencies that they will have regarding those features that they're working on or regarding their PI objective. Is very important because this is one of the major reasons why we actually even have this PI planning. We want to plan together as a team. We want to identify our risk and dependencies. We want to map all of those so that we can work in such a way that we're still able to collectively deliver at the end of the PI. So it's very important that as your team is planning per iterations, they're identifying all the risk or possible risks that they have. They're identifying any possible issues or any dependencies so that those could be addressed on the program board. So it's very important that your team does all of that work to make things easier for them at the end of the day. Now, another major thing that you're going to be doing during that PI planning is for you to coordinate with other teams. Remember that you're part of an art. So there's a possibility that your team might need something from another team on that art. And rather than your team members going to find somebody on that other team, it becomes your responsibility to coordinate with those other teams to help resolve any questions or any issues that your team may be having during that PI event. Now, another major thing that you will be doing will be to help your team create team objectives, right? Your team PI objectives. You're going to be working with your team to ensure that at the end of the 2-day event, they have their final plans, they have their final objectives, and they are ready to commit to all of the things that they have planned for. Now, before the PI event comes to an end, you want to ensure as a Scrum Master that the draft plans are reviewed, the business objectives are reviewed, and you want to ensure that their team objectives are smart. Also, you're going to be working with your RT to ensure that you have collated all the risk and dependencies that your team has, on that at-risk board, because your RT is going to need that when the final discussions are being had, at the final plan review. So you want to ensure that your team is taking out the time to review their risk because it's extremely important. Now, don't just think that because your team is doing the work that you are just going to be lazing around. It's very important that you're having those conversations, you're facilitating the discussions, you're ensuring that your team is actually doing the work, because many times you're going to see that those teams get tired, they don't want to work further, they just want to postpone things. No, this is when you have to do the work and ensure that they actually make good use of the time during their breakout time to do the required work. And that required work means ensuring that all those features have been reviewed, ensuring that they've broken it down into smaller chunks, ensuring that each of the user stories have been assigned to the various iterations within that PI, ensuring that those stories are estimated, ensure that, they have acceptance criteria, ensure that you have reviewed all of the capacity and the team is ready to go. Many times at the end of your PI, you want to ensure that the first 2 iterations out of that PI are organized, they're well detailed, and the team is ready to go and move with it. Also, another major thing that you will be doing during the PI is to ensure that your team understands that when it comes to confidence build, they are truly communicating how they feel. If they feel confident about the PI, then let them give a thumbs up of 3 to 5. And if they do not feel comfortable, then let them know that it's okay for them to vote for a 2 or vote for a 1, so that way the team can review what the concerns and the issues are, and those can be resolved before the PI comes to an end. Now, you can see that your role extends beyond just facilitating the Scrum events that you would normally do in a Scrum framework setting. Now, because you're part of an art, you're going to extend your role to the art responsibilities, and it's important that you understand which of those responsibilities are happening and what role you've got to play in each of those events. And one of that major events out there is the PI planning event. And I hope that today's video is giving you an overview of what you're expected to do as a Scrum Master working in a Scaled Agile framework. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I cannot wait to catch you on the next episode of the Exceptional Scrum Master podcast. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.